And we are back talking with Despina Priala from Priala Legal, and we're chatting about the most important day, settlement day. So if you don't get a good lawyer and plan ahead, Despina, what could go wrong?
A lot of things can go wrong. So, yeah, you're not wrong there with calling settlement date the most important day, and it is because it's critical that you settle, right? So you've signed a contract maybe 30 days ago or 45 days ago, whatever the situation is, and you know that you've got to settle on a particular date, assuming all your conditions are satisfied and you're unconditional, and then you move to settlement. Really critical, and people cannot take it for granted that, oh, well, if I need another day, I'll have it. The seller will grant me an extension if you're the buyer, or even the other way around. If the seller isn't ready, the buyer will just give me another day or two. That's okay. It doesn't work that way. Well, in Queensland, particularly, we are time of the essence. In New South Wales, it is not the case. So in New South Wales, time is not of the essence, and you can give notices to complete. Right, so it is still critical, but not as critical as Queensland, because if you default, if you don't settle on that settlement date, there are major consequences for both parties. Mm-hmm. So there are things that can go wrong that are out of your control. All right, so nothing to do with you perhaps, but to do with your bank, and the banks are the big one. So whether you're selling or whether you're buying, your bank has got to be ready early. And in this market particularly, we have found that the banks are the ones that predominantly are not going to be ready in time. For whatever reason, they're not ready themselves. Maybe they're too inundated with loans because of the buoyant property market. It's difficult to gauge. But banks are usually, the major lenders are usually spot on, but sometimes we found that they're lingering on. So they don't actually sign off on the financial figures until the morning of settlement, which makes it difficult for us to then make sure everything else is done by 4 p.m, which is your last time that you can settle in Queensland. Yeah, so there are other things that can go wrong. For example, pre-settlement inspection, right? So as your buyer, you can have a pre-settlement inspection, which you normally do the night before or the morning of settlement. The morning of settlement, if you're moving in, it's pretty rushed. You can imagine the stress that goes with moving house, and you're running around doing final packing. The removals truck turns up. You've got to have them all loaded up, and you're on your way to a new home eventually later that day. And whilst all that's going on, you've got to go and have a look at this property that you've contracted to buy, to go, you know what, I've got to do a last minute inspection. Make sure all those included chattels that are in the contract, if any, like pool cleaning equipment or anything else that you've negotiated that as part of the contract, actually is there, that the seller hasn't taken it away. It has been known to happen.
Really?
Yes.
Wow. So does that happen often? People would go in with this list of things or the full inspection, and they have to do that the morning of the settlement as well as organising moving?
Well, you don't have to do it, but it's highly recommended because you've only got 4 opportunities to inspect the property. So you can do it beforehand while you're negotiating. Then you've got another opportunity to do your pest and building. And then you've got another opportunity to conduct a valuation if your bank needs it. But you're not typically there as the buyer. You've got other parties there doing it for you. So you can imagine in a space of 30 or 45 days, has anything changed in the property? Are there now holes in the walls where people might have taken things off that they're moving with them? So, is that garden shed still there? Have they taken the pool equipment that they promised me?
Someone stole the garden shed.
Might be quite portable. I don't know. And pot plants are sometimes can be a big thing, particularly if they're a beautiful, massive pot plant with a decorative item inside, and they have included that in the contract as part of the price. And then they go and do their inspection and it's disappeared. And then we've got buyers who ring us up that morning going, I've just done my pre-settlement inspection. There's all this horrible mess. There's holes in the walls. They've taken this. What do we do? And everyone's running around trying to sort it.
And what do you do in a situation like that?
Well, first of all, I ask them to take photos because then I've got to write a letter to the other side urgently and give them evidence that my client isn't making this up, and that look at the state and condition of the property. It's different to what it was 30 days ago. and where are the items that you promised or your client promised that were going to be there, that's in the contract, that are now not there. So yeah, your phone is obviously to be used on the morning of settlement when you do your pre-settlement inspection. So yeah, it can be a nightmare.
Now, Despina, what if you get towards settlement day and something goes wrong? All right, well, what is the cut-off point? Where does it become too late?
Okay, well, the last hour between 3 and 4 p.m, if things still aren't finalised, you're in a real pickle. That's why we like to plan early. We like to plan way before the settlement date, but we're often restricted by other people like the banks and other parties that we're dealing with that delay matters. So the big, I suppose, lesson that people should take away is why it's so important, because if you don't settle, right, as a buyer, if you're in breach or you can't settle, even if it's not nothing to do with you, your bank, it's the bank's fault, you can lose your deposit, right? Because the seller might go, you know what, I'm terminating. That's it. And I'm taking your deposit. I'm going to sell it to someone else because we are in a buoyant market. So that's your biggest risk as the buyer. Of course, you can get sued for breach of contract, loss and damages, all sorts of nasty stuff. As a seller, your bank may not be ready either, which we're finding often is the case. The banks aren't ready, so then the seller has to ask for an extension, and the buyer may go, you know what, I don't want to give you an extension, I actually want to terminate. So if the seller can't settle, the buyer may go, you know what, this was my out. I didn't want to buy it in the end, and now I can get out of the contract and they can terminate, get their deposit back.
Does that happen very often?
Sometimes it does.
And something as simple as signing or witnessing a document incorrectly can happen. How does that happen?
Yep, so it can happen. So when we get to contracts, we ask clients to make sure that the names are correct, of course, and they do say that they're correct, and sometimes that they're actually not, unfortunately. So, you know, and the banks have to vet the clients, so do we with identification, and sometimes it gets missed through their system, perhaps, or another system that, well, the name of this client's actually incorrect. So then we've got to run around and get everybody to agree, well, can we change the name so we can fix this up and we actually can get it settled? So, yeah, you've got to check those contracts you sign, and if you're known by a different name, because some people are.
Yeah.
You know, John Smith, also known as John Hardy. I mean, you know, it happens. You need to tell people that, right? It's not a crime. You just need to tell your lawyer that,
What
you know,
your
this
name is.
That's it.
exactly, or both names.
Most important.
Yes.
Sounds very stressful. Look, thank you for your advice. As usual, it's you have a wealth of knowledge, and we can always take advantage of that by getting in contact with you. What's the best way to do that? Despina?
Yes, so we can call the office 55291 and you can email admin@prialalegal.com.au, visit the website Priala Legal, and check us out on YouTube.
Yep, because of course all of our segments here on Radio 97 also appear on YouTube, and you can check those out at Priala. So just type in Priala, and up will come all of the videos from the past programs. We'll talk to you next week, Despina.
See you then.
Thank you.